Hello, friends, and welcome back to the podcast. I can't believe this is our last episode for the year, and it's New Year's Eve, and I don't know if anyone's going to be listening to this at all. But if you are here, hi, whether it's New Year's Eve, Happy New Year to you, or it's 2026 and you're just catching up on a few things. This episode is going to be slightly different to our normal ones, although, of course, we can't help but have a chat about health related aspects alongside anything we do. But in this episode, this is actually really fun. So Nat's only just come back from New Zealand. I haven't even had a chance to catch up with her. So you and me are going to be grilling Nat right now about her New Zealand trip and hearing all about how it went, what she did, what she ate. Did she poo? I don't know. I just made that up. I'm gonna
Great question. Great question.
There's no questions that are off limits here, but you're going to be hearing about this in real time alongside me. And I've been dying to hear about your trip. I'm sure we'll talk more about it later, but I'm thrilled to be getting like the down low from you right now. So, first of all, welcome home. It's good to see
Thank
you. You
you.
survived, which
I
is an epic
survived.
feat.
I know it was touch and go there for a bit, but I am here. I'm alive.
So, for anyone listening who's maybe missed the fact that Nat was in New Zealand, she has just completed a trip. I think it was a couple of weeks, going hiking with a friend on her own, so her and another girlfriend, for a whole 2 weeks, which is actually a Herculean effort anyway. But for Nat, it's no secret her husband is just Mr. Capable Bushman, the go-to guy in any emergency, really. And so the part of the challenge really was that for the first time, Nat was in the driver's seat, I'm sure alongside your friend, but like assuming full responsibility for your life without your wingman, like in your corner, which I'm sure was bloody terrifying. I can't wait to hear all about that. But I've got a list of questions I want to ask you first, and I'm sure all of the other details will come spilling out as we go along. But you and I are both very passionate about eating well, eating healthy food and food that tastes good. And that doesn't necessarily align that well with tramping and camping and cooking next to a tent. So I'm really anxious to hear about like what you ate. First of all, how did you plan your meals? Obviously, there's traveling constraints around this. I'd love to hear how it turned out, what you planned for, and then like what was the reality like of 2 weeks on camping fare? Fill me in on the details.
Yeah, great question and really interesting. And I think I'm probably going to surprise some people with my responses. So, first of all, just to clarify, wasn't hiking for the whole 2 weeks straight because there was some travel times in between and we had some shit weather that we had to delay some things. But yeah, I'll give you more detail on that. But the intention with the food and how I structured it for the days that I was doing day hikes or overnight hikes was that I predominantly relied on three things. One, Radix meals, which they are a dehydrated food brand. They are actually plant based, and that wasn't intentional in terms of choosing a plant based meal provider. It was more that they're just one of the few brands that actually have good quality ingredients and still have a good amount of protein in them. So there's about 20 grams or just over per meal that you consume, and they taste good. And I mean, as good as dehydrated food can taste. I mean, I personally love the breakfast meals, by the way. I could honestly eat
Mm,
them at home, and sometimes I do if
what
I'm
were
really
they?
pushed for time. They're literally called breakfast, and it's kind of like a porridge thing that just has heaps of different like nuts, seeds, some like puffed grains in there. Like it's all gluten free, and some quote unquote superfood powders and fruit, and it just comes together really nicely.
Mm.
So I really love those ones. The savory ones, there's a variety of flavors that you can choose from, and they're still tasty. But if I had to pick one, I'd pick the breakfast
Mhm.
ones. So
Mhm.
I used those. I actually posted them over to my friend in New Zealand ahead of time because I was worried that my bag would be over the weight. It wasn't, but anyway, that's what I did. And then I also took some protein bars with me. So there's a few different brands that I often opt for when I'm hiking. So not Quest, IQ bars, and Chief Collagen bars, the Amazonia Raw ones, Blue Dinosaur. Those are probably some of the most common ones that I would use and recommend. And they were delicious and like such a treat when I mean, I think every time you get to eat when you're hiking or camping is just so exciting because it's kind of like the stop point in your day. So that's what I did. And then honestly, my toxic trait when I am on holidays, I don't go on holidays very often. Like I reckon I do a holiday maybe once a year.
Mm.
My toxic trait, which my beautiful client and now friend Hannah got to see in full force, is I drink way too much coffee for what is appropriate for my goals. And when I say way too much, I mean like I'll have two coffees a day instead of one or none. Like usually at home in my usual routine at the moment, pre going away, I had a break from coffee for a few months and then I brought it back in, but I was just having one kind of 3 days a week and then having decaf the other days. I would have had two coffees every single day of this trip. And I have no problem with sharing that or doing that because A, I felt fine doing it. I wasn't getting any blood sugar crashes. B, I knew that it was super short term. And C, like people have soul foods and like things that they just like love but know aren't an everyday thing that they should do for months on end.
Mm.
Drinking good coffee is probably one of mine.
Mm.
So I did that. At times I even had it on an empty stomach. Oh,
Oh,
gas.
cardinal
Um,
sin.
yeah, and it's really interesting, especially doing those behaviors that I would recommend against on a daily basis in your everyday life for months on end in front of a client who I recommend not doing it to. So me and Hannah, who was my client now friend, who is a Kiwi and helped me with the first part of our little hiking adventure. It was we had some good chats about that because I did feel like it's funny, I think, being someone who has a podcast and, is sharing health information, is advising clients, all that kind of stuff. And I genuinely believe that I practice what I preach like 95% of the time. But like every single human on this planet, I'm not perfect and I do sometimes do things that are not in alignment with what I feel like is best for me if I was doing it every single day. But I also was like, I'm not going to change myself or try and be a perfectionist in front of, a client or a friend or anyone else because I also feel like that's inauthentic to what I also believe to be true, which is that you can still be a healthy, happy, aligned human, even if there's, probably even less than 5% of the time where you're doing something that maybe ordinarily you wouldn't do. So like that's definitely a habit I have when I travel is I often will have coffee on an empty stomach or have more than one in a day, but that's with the caveat that I feel totally fine. Like whereas if I tried to do that at home
Mm.
frequently in the context of being a little bit more at my capacity, a little bit more stress, a little bit less movement, I'd probably feel a bit blood sugary from that
Mm.
or get some crashes from an energy perspective. But I was outside all day getting beautiful sunlight exposure. I was moving my body. I did not have a care in the world for most of it. And I didn't feel any effects from it. So they're like the main things. I'm trying to think if there was anything else. Or at times, like when we were traveling and we were kind of in our days in between, I did eat out a couple of times, which was really delicious. Shout out to Big Fig in Wanaka, which is my favorite place to go and consume food. And then also, I just relied on kind of grabbing some fruit and like Greek yogurt from the supermarket, to be honest, as a little bit of an alternative and novelty from the dehydrated food when had the privilege of like being near a fridge. And Hannah also cooked me a meal a couple of times when we got rained out from doing an overnighter at one point, and that was absolutely delicious. It's also just when someone else cooks for me. It's not something that happens all that often because as incredible as my husband is at 1 million things, cooking is not one of them. So like
Well,
it's
there is
really
something he can't do.
there is
Eh?
something, yeah. Yep. Yep. So that's what your husband's for and
Yes.
also what friends are for. So yeah, I think that the food thing, I honestly I didn't make it a high priority to live my best nutritional life over there. I mean, I've shared very transparently what I did. I'd probably say that I a mistake I made also was that I reckon I underate for the amount of activity that I was doing for sure. And part of it, I think for me, was habit. Part of it was that even with the small time difference, my body clock was like a New Zealander with 3 hours ahead of what my body felt like it was. So I really didn't wake up hungry. I obviously made that worse by having coffee on an empty stomach, which suppresses your appetite further. So another mistake, well, intentional mistake. And then so everything kind of got pushed back. And then also, I didn't want to carry heaps of food with me because it sucks carrying more weight in your pack. And so I think a little bit that I'd already spent quite a lot of money just making all of this happen, that I wasn't in a position where I wanted to just like eat out here, there, everywhere. So I definitely feel like if my example of what I did is not an example of what I think is ideal, it's more just an honest recount of what happened. But again, for me, it just comes back to like it's 2 weeks of my life. It's not a reflection of what I'm doing all of the time.
Mm.
And yeah, so that's basically what I ate. It didn't get much more exciting than that, to be honest.
Well, I think you make a really good point. I think everyone can relate to the holiday versions of themselves versus their day-to-day versions of themselves. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who did the exact same thing when they were traveling, regardless of what that looked like versus what they're like at home. And in a way, I mean, I recognize elements of that for myself too. And when you are on holiday, typically your nervous system is more relaxed. And so you can get away with things like that a little bit more also. And I love that. It's just a nice example of really you don't have to be perfect all the time. It's not worth stressing yourself out trying to stick to your normal routines. And you also don't have to in order to keep your health on track. Live a little, even if it is with dehydrated camping food.
And I also ate tuna and rice cakes, and fuck, I was sick of them by the end of it. We
Oh,
joke about that in our friendship group because when Bowen and I went to Europe, we ate so much tuna and rice cakes.
yeah, there's going to be none of that on the menu for a little while, I'm sure. Oh my God. Well, look, on the same sort of domain as what you're ingesting, I know at home you have a Zazen water filter. While I was house sitting, babysitting baby Chino, I got to enjoy some of your Zazen water too. What did you do about water while you were over there? Did you take a purifier with you of some description?
Yeah, I took a GeoPress, which is a water, like it's a pretty hardcore water filtration thing that people use when they're hiking or camping. It's pretty bulky. It's not something that I'd recommend as like a day-to-day water filter, but it is great when you are traveling or hiking because you can, you could filter most water except for like salt water through it.
Mm.
And that was just something that was super simple. We also had water bladders. So I would geopress all of the water before the start of the day hike and then just put that water into the water bladder. And even though it's plastic, you kind of like you just have to cut corners when you're hiking it sometimes when you're carrying weight and for it to be achievable. So I wasn't really worried about that. But yeah, geopress water is what
Mm.
is a geopress water bottle is what I used when I was hiking. And even when I wasn't, that's kind of just, I just use that most of the time.
Amazing. I've got a Waterman filter, but I mean, they are plastic for a reason because it's less weight than, say, stainless steel, and obviously glass could break in a pack. So you have to choose your priority, and clean water that's not going to make you sick is obviously always going to come out on top. But the Waterman that I've got is actually quite bulky and an annoying shape. So I think having since looked at the GeoPress, I'm going to put that on my birthday wish list. And I love that for you. And it sounds like that was just an easy thing to get yourself situated for the whole day. Now, something that's not as predictable though, and this is a little fear I had on your behalf while you were away, was obviously this trip would have been planned somewhat in advance. And for us girlies who get a period, I mean, I don't imagine camping and having a period. That just complicates things to a whole other friggin' level. And as endo girlies, where, being out of your routine or a bit stressed or, the wind's blowing the wrong way can affect your hormones slash period slash immune system inflammatory load quite a bit. So, just going to ask the question I'm sure all the girls are thinking is like, did you get your period? What did you do? How did you navigate this part of it?
Yeah, I didn't, but that was intentional. I made sure when I booked it that I wasn't going to be getting my period, or at least, to the best of my ability, wasn't going to be getting my period while I was traveling because, I mean, for me, it just, I still do. My period pain's very manageable now, but it's very manageable in the context of resting and like doing all the things. And also, um, I just didn't want to be like have that anxiety of is it going to come when I'm hiking or when I'm camping, more so from the pain and capacity perspective, less so the logistics. I mean, I probably just would have taken, probably tampons and pads and hand sanitizer and just like dealt with it that way while I was out there. But I definitely went out of my way to ensure that I didn't have it. But in saying that, far out, definitely, I definitely got more PMS than I usually do at home. At the last week that I was there was the week leading up to my period. Literally, I walked back in the door and I got my period. The week leading up to that, it's probably a combination of a few different things. So, for starters, I did not sleep well in New Zealand really at all. And I need, I promised Hannah I would do this. I need to make a public apology to all of my Kiwi clients for not understanding how friggin' bright it is in the summertime. It doesn't start to get dark until like 8:45. And I was just so thrown off by that as someone who's very used to it getting dark, at least an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours before I'm going to bed. I don't know whether it was the time difference or the light. It's like 9 p.m. and I was not, my body was like, this does not make sense. I see light. So I didn't sleep particularly well a lot of the time. There was also some other factors, like we had a tent malfunction at a camping ground incident, and I stayed in a tiny house that was also not ideal. I did have a good sleep at Jin Ong. So she's the art of listening to your body. We've had her on the podcast before. She's, some of you may know her. had a great sleep in her little dome setup that she had that was all feng shui set up and everything. But
Heaven.
apart from that, I definitely struggled. So a bit of sleep deprivation led to this PMS. Also didn't have all of my supplements with me and hadn't been taking them consistently except for kind of basically magnesium
Mm,
was the only thing, and electrolytes was really the only thing I took consistently, whereas at home I do actually take more than that to optimize my hormones and manage things.
mm,
So I think the sleep deprivation, the under eating, probably having more coffee could have contributed as well, and not having my usual supplements. Definitely, I was more irritable. Like I remember being on a boat coming back from being in the national park and just feeling so irritated at everything. Like someone was just getting off the boat really slowly, and I just felt like I was just like, you know, when you're just fuming inside, being like,
yeah.
why are you so slow? And I can be a bit impatient at the best of times when I'm feeling already that way. And this person, yeah, and I think Georgie, who I was with, could probably sense it because like every everything was irritating me. And I said to her, look, I'm so sorry, but I'm feeling really irritated. I can't go back out into the world. We need to just like chill out somewhere,
Mhm.
not with people for a
Yeah.
bit.
Get me out of here.
So yeah, that was my way of navigating my period, but I definitely experienced some more PMS, which is a good testament to the fact that my usual healthy habits and supplementation routine is obviously doing its job.
Yeah, 100%. Well, just to fully chat about supplements, you and I both take, I guess, a system of things that we know really work for us and address, everything from covering our nutritional bases to actually targeting whatever we're specifically working on or dealing with. But when you were planning your trip, obviously the weight of your bag would have been a concern, not just from like airline baggage restrictions, but also you have to carry that thing everywhere you go. What did you decide? Did you just keep it to magnesium and electrolytes and that's it?
Yeah, I took magnesium citrate in particular because it has more of a laxative effect than glycinate, and my tendency when I travel is constipation, though I will say I pooed every single day, everybody.
High
So
five.
the electrolytes, thank you. The electrolytes, the magnesium citrate did their job, and then I also took my Chase Tree, my Vitex, which is one supplement I do use for my hormones, and I took melatonin, but I got a bit generous with like handing it out at the beginning, and I ran out towards the end.
Oops.
But that did, as much as I did struggle with sleep, that's not normal for me. I think that there were just the other factors that really influenced that. Whereas normally I do travel with melatonin. I think it's a great way to help your body or assist your body in avoiding jet lag and resetting to the time zone, as well as just exposing yourself to as much natural light as possible. So I'm a huge fan of that, even though it wasn't enough to counteract some other factors this trip. It is something that I always take with me.
Mm. And now that you do have your period, how's that been?
Actually okay. Like the period itself was okay. I actually didn't have any more pain than last cycle. So I think I've shared this on the podcast before that at my worst with my period pain, I've had to use in a cycle to manage it 6 Nurofen and 2 codeine just to cope. Whereas I now last cycle I didn't use any pain relief at all, and this cycle I took one single Nurofen, and I probably could have not, but I was right on the edge of like, do I, don't I? Was at night, and I just knew that what my body really needed was a deep, good sleep. And I just thought, I'm just going to take one, in terms of weighing up the pros and the cons. And I also, the other factor to that as well this cycle was something else I often use to manage my period pain quite effectively is CBD oil. And I had run out and I didn't realize I had run out. So I also didn't have that in my corner. So really everything held up quite well for me. I do feel like I had slightly less good blood flow from a circulation perspective. And usually my herbs that I take do have extra circulatory support in them. So there was a little bit of an effect from it, but honestly, not that much. And I think probably, the benefits of spending lots of time in nature and, moving my body lots and just the other good things that had happened on the trip probably helped to mitigate some of the not so supportive things.
Yeah, wow. I find that really amazing because although I'm sure there was an abundance of really wonderful things, being in nature, being with awesome people, having all of these new incredible experiences, and New Zealand is beautiful. I'm very biased when I say that as a Kiwi, but it is gorgeous. That being said, I know that for you, this was a really big personal challenge that you set yourself. And I mean, I'm actually in such awe of what you did, and I'll let you share your story about why this isn't just a hike with a friend overseas, but there were many challenges you had to overcome in order to really do this and extract the joy from it. And so I think it's really quite amazing knowing like how our periods are often a reflection of where our nervous system is at, that actually overall it was pretty darn good. So I think that's amazing. But I'd love you to share about like why this journey was like such an important thing for you to do, and really how much out of your comfort zone it was.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it really it's hard to articulate in a way that gets across the bigness that it is for me, because when I describe it in a very, practical, pragmatic way of even just the logistics and the background, it doesn't feel like it necessarily does justice to the weight of how I have felt emotionally. But to give a little bit of context, so rewind back to my childhood, where it all starts, of course, is that when I was about 10 years old, I'm not going to go into lots of detail just because there's more people involved in the story than just myself. But when I was about 10 years old, I had an experience that had me feel like I had been kidnapped essentially, and that I wasn't able to get myself back to what I felt like was safety, despite trying to advocate for myself and trying to do that. And it left a really massive imprint on me, in that from that point forward, my parents were split up. I couldn't stay at my dad's house. Like I would get panic attacks if I tried to sleep over. I really, I struggled with sleepovers. I, I, I barely made it to school camp. I'd have again like a full blown, what I can now see in hindsight, panic attack when I was getting on the bus to go to a school camp. And the only reason I was able to go on two of them, I opted out of many others, but two of them was because I had and still have a best friend, Holly, who was very similar in temperament and nature to my mum and would essentially just support me through it. And there had to be lots of contingent, like plans in place of people reassuring me that if I wanted to go home, I could. But I used to just be lying there counting down the days until I could go home. And then, after that, I went through a period where I wouldn't even sleep in my own bed. I just like would not leave my mum's side. And this was all very like subconscious. It wasn't like I was connecting the dots of like this happened, now this. And it just kind of honestly spiraled from there into then expressing itself more as a teenager and in my early adulthood, of really not being able to go anywhere, to like a party, to any kind of location where I wasn't in control of getting myself back. Even to the degree of it took me a couple of years to be able to drive 2 hours down the coast to see Bowen's family, and not drive separately to him. Of course, it makes zero sense for us to drive separately to the same location 2 hours away. But for a couple of years there, I didn't understand again why. I just knew that I needed to be in my own car. I needed to be the only one affected by if I chose to come home. And I needed it to be a decision that I could just make at any point in time without needing permission from anybody. So that, like, and that was even into my early, it must have been into my early 20s as well. So there was kind of that part of, oh yeah, I also came home early from schoolies. I tried to go and then I had a panic attack and came home. So I mean I have a Sagittarius moon. I love travel, I love adventure, but it's always been completely just overshadowed by, or have has this push pull with the fact that I've had this, traumatic experience that has left me feeling like struggling to be out of my familiar places, and without control of getting my of being able to go home when I want to, or it being influenced by anyone else, no matter how close they were to me.
Mm.
So that was one challenge. I also, like, I have a bit of a limiting belief or story about being incapable, which some of my closest friends laugh at me for, like, in a loving way of being like, how? Like, you do lots of different things. And I think it does surprise people. But again, like, you just don't know what people's, beliefs are or stories are until you talk to them. And again, I'm like, I won't go into lots of detail, but I just feel like I carried and still carry at times this thought that I'm so much less capable as an adult in the world than everybody else is. And I also think that in this outdoor space and even in travel, I feel like I just have so much less experience. And I'm obviously married to someone who is really capable and really resourceful and very good with all of that. And so, he's definitely been my comfort zone in stepping into the world of, hiking and camping and outdoor and navigation and that kind of stuff. So I haven't had to develop the confidence to the degree where my fallback is myself instead of my husband.
Mm.
And that's beautiful in the sense that he's enabled me to be able to even start to develop some pseudo confidence in that space. But I also didn't, like, I didn't want to leave myself with this story that I can only do those things because I've got him.
Mm.
Um, Not because I don't enjoy doing them with him. I actually do. He's my favorite person ever to do that stuff with. But there's something really empowering and freeing and liberating for me to go, I I can change my story myself, and I can do these things by myself or with other women if I choose. I'm not able to only do these, experiences because he's there. And I
Mm.
also don't have to hold myself to his standard, as in his level of, he doesn't hold me to any standard like that. But I look at him and I go, God, well, until I'm as capable and resourceful and intelligent as equipped as that, I can't go and do something like this.
Mm.
And because that standard in my eyes is incredibly high, because he's just very capable, I think I let myself believe that I'm just never going to get there.
Mm.
So there was that element of just like being capable. I also fucking hate driving. And I had to hire a car by myself. And it was so funny walking up to the counter. Had This was about halfway through the trip. I didn't need a car for a lot of it because I was with other people or I was literally hiking. But there was just a bit of, bit of visiting in between where I did. And so I went up to the counter. I probably looked so funny because I'm a short human. I'm like 5 foot. And I had this huge hiking pack on my back. I had also a big day pack on my front. So I'm basically just part bag, part human. And I probably look like 12. And I'm walking up to the counter and I'm already being like, oh my gosh, are they going to let me hire the car that I hired? And I talk to the guy. Of course, he's lovely. He mansplains a few things, which is fine. And then he says, do you know where the car park is? And the rental car park. And I'm like, oh no. And then he says, where it is in very non easy to follow directions. But I was too embarrassed to be like, I don't know where you mean. So he's like, got it? And I'm like, yep, no worries.
Smiley
And
nod.
again, yeah, and again, another one of my things is, don't want to be a burden. And also I really do have a bad sense of direction. I'm not even being hard on myself here. I genuinely, whatever gene codes for knowing north, east, south, west direction situations, I do not have it. I do not possess. So, which is also why I was nervous hiking. But anyway, so I go out. I end up in God knows where. It's certainly not the rental car park. I feel like that panic start to rise when you're lost, even though I know it's fine. I'm literally at an airport. I can't be that lost. And I just had to talk myself like I think I started to get nervous of like, what am I doing? I can't do this. I'm failing at step one. Anyway, I managed to talk myself down off that. I found the rental car park. I got in the car, and then I was driving from, if anyone knows New Zealand, I was driving from Queenstown to Wanaka. And there's a couple of ways that you can actually drive from one to the other. I didn't know that at the time. I just popped into good old trusty Siri, the directions, and it gave me one way. And in hindsight, I learnt that the way I chose was like the sketchy, mountain, windy, open winded road. And I oscillated between, I kid you not, having like I'm a badass bitch energy music that is capable of anything to calming meditation breathing tunes, like just driving because you can't stop, you can't pull over. It's just one road, and there's so many tourists in, camper vans and all sorts of things. And New Zealand roads are a little bit sketchy at the best of times in parts. And as someone who's not a particularly confident driver, navigator, and was already just feeling a little bit on edge. It was definitely an interesting experience. I was very relieved to get to the other side of that drive. And then the next thing that happened was that I had a day in between where I was just going to be by myself, and I decided I wanted to stay in a tiny house because I used to be really obsessed with them, and I used to watch Big Living in a Tiny House YouTube videos all of the time. So I found one, and I also hadn't. I think I'd stayed at an Airbnb like once by myself before. Again, another new thing that is easy for me to feel like embarrassed by because I'm an adult in their 30s, but I is what it is. And I didn't really feel nervous about that, to be honest. I was like, it's all pretty straightforward. But this tiny house, I got into it, and when you walk in somewhere and you're just like, this energy feels really off. And I couldn't put my finger on it, but it felt off. It felt stuffy, like not full blown moldy, but that kind of stuffy smell, that like almost musty smell that comes with somewhere that is water damaged. I kind of felt that. Um, more than anything, it just felt like the energy in there was really off. And I think I was already feeling, I'd obviously already had quite a big day. So wasn't feeling my most grounded self. Didn't have anything that I would usually use to assist me to clear the space. And there would be ways to clear it. They weren't my usual. And then when I went to go to sleep at night, it was so windy. Like so windy that the tiny house was like rattling, and the wind noise was so loud. I recorded it on my phone and sent it to my husband of like, this is the last sound of me living, if you want to know. And I felt like I just could not sleep at all. And I was lying there and Googling like weather warnings New Zealand in case like, there was some kind of cyclone happening and they'd forgot that someone was in the tiny house and I was about to just like blow off into the South
No.
Island. And anyway, there was no such warning. I think it was just a windy night. But I did not sleep like a single minute, I don't think, that whole time. So that was interesting. So that was like part of it. I'll pause there because that's a lot of information.
Wow. I mean, there's just, it sounds like you almost had like 10 holidays in one. There were so many different experiences all wrapped down there, which just makes it even more phenomenal. I can't wait to hear all the juicy details over a meal very soon. But all of that to say is, it's not a small undertaking to plan a 2 week trip overseas with one other friend, and all of that, including the hiking, the camping, and the other challenges you had. So I am like, I'm beyond proud of you, my friend, because I know all the details that you haven't shared about, why this was such a Everest for you in a way, and you just navigated it with such capability, actually, and grace. I'm absolutely blown away by that. But before we stop the episode, I want to actually hear about how you went from having a client, Hannah, to going hiking, becoming friends and going hiking together. Take us on that journey.
Yes. Well, she's a podcast listener, so hello if you're listening.
Hi.
So, I first, yeah, Hannah and I first met because she was a client, is a client of mine, and we just got along super well, as I do with lots of my clients. But there's just every now and again there's someone that you really just connect with over many things, and so and she's also a wonderful outdoor guide. She's very experienced in the outdoors. We actually even, guys, we even stalked some wild deer. Very impromptu stalking, but it was so fun. The only thing we were concerned about is that I was so chatty when I was with Hannah that she's like, "You're gonna have to stop speaking for a bit."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you have an off button? A momentary mute.
Say less. So we did do that until we got mauled by sandflies, but that was really fun. So yeah, and part of it also of how that came about is that I had visited New Zealand previously and was going to an area where Hannah was, and so Bowen, myself, and Hannah met up for a little day hike, and we all got on super well. And I actually got to see how similar Bowen and Hannah are. So I was like, ding, genius. Of course, I just go from going with Bowen to then going with Hannah, who's basically, like has a lot of similar traits to Bowen. And it was so, so beautiful. Like, Hannah was incredible to go on my first hike with, because the way she supported me on it was just so lovely, in terms of it was very similar to how Bowen supports me. So first of all, when we went on our biggest kind of day hike, we were going to stay overnight, but there was really bad weather and poor Hannah got sick, so we didn't. But we were going somewhere completely like, back country, not a very tracked path, so to speak. So we're bush bashing heaps, which is so good in New Zealand because nothing can hurt you. Whereas in Australia, I would be like, I'm definitely getting bitten by a snake. I'm basically going to die today. Whereas in New Zealand, I was like, this is fine. But, she navigated the way up the mountain, and then she gave me the opportunity to navigate the way down. And just the way that she supported me in, not helicopter navigating, like she's like, just have a go. If you go completely the wrong way, I will tell you. But just that ability to really have a chance to have a crack. And she just, she was just really patient with me as well, and really encouraged me not to feel like I had to do it the way she did it, but just to find my own way to do things, even if it was different to her, which
Mm.
at times it needed to be. Like, as a very practical example, my short legs, they're not jumping the same river rocks that Hannah's are. So I actually had to take my shoes off at one point to just get a river crossing in. And there was one really quite funny moment. It might have been a funny moment that you had to be there for, but I will tell it anyway. We were at the very end of this big hike, and it was quite a decent day of hiking and quite a lot of elevation. And we'd finally gotten down to the last part of it, and it started to open up a bit more. It was quite like open and grassy, as opposed to what we'd already been bush bashing through. And Hannah was just saying to me, you've done so well. You're a natural, like just giving me all these beautiful compliments, and my little Leo heart is just lighting up. And I, in a space of 60 seconds after she said that, I roll my ankle, it's fine, but I roll my ankle and then I take another few steps forward and then I pause. I look back to Hannah to be like, because she was like, when she saw my ankle roll, I'm like, everything's fine, Hannah, don't worry. My ankles are super flexy from all the netball and Oz tag. It's just popped right on back into place. Nothing to see here. Then her face like completely changes and I'm like, she's like, just you're standing on a dead sheep. And it was just so random that of all of this hugely open field that I chose that moment to stand on a dead sheep, like in the middle of a huge field right after she'd just said how capable and everything I was. And I was so like in shock that I forgot to step off the dead sheep and I just looked straight down to its like face and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like its eyeballs are gone." And being like a Kiwi that Hannah is who has, like, been exposed to hunting and just like nature all the time, she's just like, "Oh yeah, the birds, like they get them sometimes when they're still alive." And I'm still standing in the dead sheep. I still have not caught up to be like, I should step off this sheep now. And it was just one of those moments where it was so me. It's like, I've done the thing, I've shown I'm capable, and then I do something really just dorky and clumsy, like roll my ankle and step in a dead sheep. But anyway, Hannah handled everything incredibly, incredibly well, and she's actually starting an outdoor guiding business, for lack of a better term, or experiences for women. So if you are in New Zealand, I'll pop the link in the show notes. Please, and even if you're not and you want to travel, like please go and check it out. She's just such a pleasure to be around, and I have no doubt that what she creates in that space is going to be really epic. But yeah, as I said at the beginning, what was an interesting experience for me was, and I shared this with Hannah at the time, was also having the courage to be fully seen by someone in my vulnerability, in even in some of my not so quote unquote healthy habits like drinking too much coffee,
Mm.
in front of someone who I know for no doing of her own but would have a bit of a pedestally rose colored glasses version of me just because I'm obviously mostly up until that point had interacted together as her practitioner and giving knowledge and advice. And then on this podcast where I definitely am completely myself, like so myself, but it's also impossible to show all sides of yourself in
Mm.
a single platform or a single conversation. And so it was really actually quite healing for me to go, you know what, even if I'm not perfect and I have insecurities and flaws that maybe people wouldn't assume because I do come across as quite confident in the
Mm.
spaces where I am publicly facing, it's still okay. And that if and to me it's something that I really admire in other people and that I really invite in from other people. And so it was really, I don't know, it's just really beautiful to let myself just be all of me and know that that might break down or like cut down some of that assumed perfect, not perfection, but you know what I mean, like people.
Mm.
And it's not just me. I just think with anyone that we admire or parts of their work or their knowledge or their personality or their strength, it's natural to assume or draw conclusions that, oh, this is how they are in every space of their life. And I think it takes a lot of courage to, when you know that you've been put in that position just by the consequence of being sharing things publicly that are more of a like a version of yourself because that's just what certain platforms and contexts call for. I think it's really, I know, it's really freeing. I found it really liberating to just allow that to be what it was.
Wow, what an amazing story and experience to close out 2025 on. And I think it's lovely that you were able to just finish up the end of the year having broken through so many things that like limiting beliefs really more than anything about yourself and what you can do. And I hope that if you have listened to it on this side of New Year's, anybody listening, that you take a leaf out of Nat's book and really take that courage yourself into 2026. And if you are listening to this on the flip side of the new year, we're actually going to be in your ear holes next week with how to set up your year for success. So if you're looking for a little inspiration and a little guidance, may this episode be the fuel for your own personal fire. And we look forward to guiding you with some extra tips, tricks, and tools in a week.
See you then, guys.
Bye, friends. Happy New Year's. Bye.